Wow, okay. Our listener, they've given us a lot to unpack this
They
time.
really have.
We're diving into Reddit, right? Posts and comments, all from one user, Rough Context 5778, and honestly, this is one of the more interesting deep dives we've done.
It is fascinating how much one user can reveal about themselves online, isn't it?
Yeah. And this one talk about all over the place. We've got AI, we've got Wellington, New Zealand,
Life in the city, it seems.
and then like totally out of left field Eastern philosophy. You wouldn't think those all go together.
Not at first glance, no. But that's the beauty of these deep dives. There's always a thread connecting these seemingly disparate interests.
Okay, so thread. Let's talk about it. We're seeing Rough Context 5778. They're kind of poking fun at AI, trying to summarize whole subreddits, right? Even calling it a waste of electricity at one point. What did you think about that when you saw that?
Well, it struck me as a very human response to this increasingly technological world,
Yep.
Like there's this inherent understanding that human interaction, especially in online communities, has this nuance. And AI, even one that can summarize, might miss the point entirely.
Totally. Okay, so then, and this is where it gets really interesting, they start talking about Maya in the Renlightenment subreddit. Now, I have to admit, that one threw me for a loop.
It is a bit of a head spinner if you're not familiar with Eastern philosophy.
Exactly. So, for those of us who haven't reached enlightenment just yet, could you maybe give us a little, I don't know, a crash course on Maya? What are we even talking about here?
Absolutely. In essence, Maya refers to the illusion of separateness. It's the idea that we experience ourselves as individual, isolated beings. The reality, at least according to this concept, is that everything is interconnected.
Okay, so it's not that the world is fake, exactly.
Right. It's more about how our perception can sometimes trick us into feeling separate when we're actually part of a much larger, completely interconnected web.
So we're all connected. Okay, but then how does Rough Context 5778, how do they bring this whole Maya thing, like, back around to AI? I mean, we were talking about Wellington, New Zealand a second ago. It's a lot to keep track of.
And yet they do seem to connect it all, don't they?
They do.
It's almost like they see a parallel between the way AI tries to understand us, summarize our conversations, and the way we as humans put up these walls of separation, even subconsciously,
Yeah.
as we interact with the world around us.
Huh. And that actually reminds they had this one comment, it really stuck with me. Something like, we learn about the self through acceptance of others as a part of the self. I don't know, what do you make of that?
That right there, that's getting to the core of this illusion of separateness idea, isn't it?
Mm.
Because if we can truly accept this idea of interconnectedness, right, that we're all connected, that others are, in a way, reflections of ourselves, well, it changes everything about how we approach relationships, interaction.
Sounds like,
By understanding them, we understand ourselves better. Exactly. And that's a powerful concept. That's where things can get really interesting. Breaking down those illusions, realizing that connection, that's where personal breakthroughs happen. Societal ones, too, potentially.
okay, but hold on, because now I'm really confused. They also talk about everyone having their own separate illusions. They even say something like, one full of the illusion of separateness. So which is it?
Yeah.
Are we all connected, or are we all just trapped in our own little bubbles?
It's a paradox, isn't it? The human experience.
Mm.
Because we exist as individuals, we have unique experiences and perspectives. But simultaneously, we are also part of something much, much larger than ourselves, if you'll indulge a bit of a metaphor.
Sure.
Think of it like the ocean, right? Each of us, we're like a wave. We have our own shape. We rise and fall. We crash on the shore. But ultimately, we are all part of the same body of water.
Wow. Okay, now I am getting a little existential over here. But this is what's so fascinating about Rough Context 5778, AI, Wellington, Eastern philosophy. They're grappling with some really big questions here about consciousness, technology, what it even means to be human. And they're doing it all on Reddit.
Leaving these little breadcrumbs of thought for us to follow, yeah. And one of those breadcrumbs, it leads to a YouTube video, if you can believe it, simply titled, Talk to Me.
What do you think that's all about? I mean, do we even try to analyze that?
We can speculate, sure. It could be a piece of art, a song, even just someone speaking their truth. Honestly, I have no idea. But it obviously resonated with Rough Context 5778.
Yeah.
Made me think about, what it even means to really talk and listen these days. In a world where so much communication is digital.
It's a good question. And it leads us to why we're all here, right? This deep dive, trying to figure out what it all means. But before we get too far down that road, I kind of want to turn it over to the listener for a second. What are you thinking right now? So I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. AI, Eastern philosophy, even a random YouTube video. And somehow it all connects back to this idea of Maya that Rough Context 5778 keeps bringing up, like this illusion of separateness and how it kind of plays out online especially.
It really makes you think about those online interactions, doesn't it?
Totally.
Because so often we forget there's a real person on the other side of the screen, someone with their own experiences, their own struggles, their own unique perspective.
It's like those digital avatars, those usernames, they almost make it too easy to forget our shared humanity sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's why I think these ideas from Rough Context 5778 are so important. Especially now, if we can, even for a moment, remember that we're all connected, that those others online are, in a way, reflections of ourselves. Well, we could change how we approach those interactions entirely.
Okay, but like how do we actually do that? It's easy to talk about oneness and interconnectedness and all that, but actually putting it into practice online, it feels like a whole other challenge.
It starts with awareness, I think.
Awareness. Okay, so like,
The next time you're about to leave a heated comment or you get sucked into some debate online, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I coming from a place of curiosity or just a need to be right? And, if it's the latter, maybe it's time to step back, rethink the approach. Remember, it's not about winning the argument, right? It's about connecting, understanding, even if you don't agree.
empathy over ego.
Exactly. And here's something else to consider. Rough Context 57788 also talks about how everyone has their own separate illusions,
Yeah.
right? So even as we try to break down those walls of separation, we also need to remember that everyone is coming from their own unique experience with their own set of filters that shape how they see the world.
Okay, so even as we're striving for that connection, we gotta approach it with a bit of grace, understanding that everyone's coming from their own place.
Exactly. Finding that balance, that's the key.
This has been, wow, it's been a journey. I mean, who knew a deep dive into one Reddit user's posts could be so thought-provoking? But I think it speaks to something really important, even in those online spaces, even in those little comments, those fleeting interactions, we can find these nuggets of wisdom, these opportunities to reflect on ourselves, on technology, on what it even means to be human in this digital age.
And ultimately, I think it all circles back to choice.
Choice.
How do we want to engage with each other?
Online and offline, you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Online, offline, it all blends together. But at the end of the day, it comes down to that choice. Separation or connection. Fear or empathy. It's a question worth asking. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, if enough of us start choosing connection, choosing empathy, we can actually start to change the tone of these online spaces.
Yeah.
Make them a little kinder, a little more understanding, a little more human, one interaction at a time.
What a great note to end on. And to our listener, thank you so much for sending us down this rabbit hole. It's proof that you never know where these deep dives will take us.